I'm Sarah Augustine, the Executive Director and co-founder of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. Our society now faces the stark consequences of ecological overshoot, including climate change. Many of us from Christian traditions wish to resist systems of power in a proactive way, but we most often participate in performative actions rather than engaging in systems change. Many of us do not know how to approach systems change. Indigenous peoples have successfully lived sustainably within their ecosystems because they've built systems designed to do this. Let us consider together how we might do so by consulting with Indigenous experts.
This morning, it's my great pleasure to introduce Tela Loretta Troge, who is a member of the Shinnecock Indian Nation and a member of the Hassanamisco Nipmuc Tribe. She is a land defender and water protector fighting climate change through the Indigenous women's group Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, an intergenerational collective of water and land protectors. She organized the Warriors of the Sunrise Sovereignty Camp in 2020 to raise awareness about the plight of the Shinnecock people. Tela graduated from Michigan State University College of Law with a Juris Doctor and certification in Indigenous Law and Policy from the Indigenous Law Program. She has been fighting for tribal sovereignty for the past 7 years as the attorney with the law offices of Tela L. Troge, PLLC.
My name is Tela Troge. I am a member of the Shinnecock Nation. I am an attorney and a Shinnecock Kelp farmer. So kelp is an amazing type of seaweed that has the ability to sequester carbon and extract nitrates from the water. We are farming in the Shinnecock Bay. We are separated by a barrier island to the Atlantic Ocean. We live in a really sensitive ecological area, and with the overdevelopment and the lack of septic planning, everything has basically died. In 2019, we had started a climate adaptation and mitigation plan with some partners at the Peconic Estuary Program, and they had recommended that we surround our entire territory with kelp farms, specifically to address the problem of ocean acidification and the impact it's having on the shellfish of the area. So traditionally and culturally, our nation is known as producing a type of bead called wampum, and so the wampum shell, unfortunately due to ocean acidification in recent years, has become really brittle, really hard to make into beads, really hard to continue this cultural legacy. And so the kelp farms should really have a huge impact on mitigating that process and returning the health of the shellfish. So it's not complicated, but it's a little complicated. It starts with going out and diving for the source tissue, and that's become harder and harder in recent years because the water around Long Island is becoming warmer. Sugar kelp cultivation is a cold weather crop, so we are out there in January and February, March even. We bring the source material back and we release it into tubes. We cultivate the seedlings in a hatchery on spools, and then when it's time for the seedlings to leave the hatchery, we wind them up onto marine rope and place them out into the bay. We have about 8 lines in the bay right now. Each line is 100 feet. So our end product is a type of fertilizer / soil amendment that we are going to sell to farms and institutions and golf courses. So it really goes back to this concept of reciprocity. Indigenous people know that if we take care of the Mother Earth, that Mother Earth will then take care of us. So we hope to see wide-scale kelp farming. We can't do this alone. We are a collective of 6 intergenerational Indigenous women, and we're doing our part, but we need to build a huge network, a huge collective of kelp farmers.
Welcome, Tela. It's such a pleasure to have you here this morning in our speakers series. And just to frame the question in a general way, we are working to understand, through the lens of Indigenous cosmology, what alternatives do we have to self-interest and sort of the economic system that is set up now, which is essentially an understanding of removing barriers so that individuals can pursue self-interest, their own self-interest. And that's resulted in a situation where we're experiencing climate change as a world, and the subjugation of Indigenous people across the world for centuries. And so we are taking this question, really asking, interrogating, what other system could there be? How else might we relate to each other other than simply setting up a mechanism in pursuit of self-interest? And so we're asking systems thinkers to come at that question from our own traditional views and our own cosmologies. So I just leave you to respond to that in whichever way you wish. Welcome, Tela. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me and for engaging in this really important dialogue. I am a member of the Shinnecock Indian Nation. We are a tribe of about 1,600 citizens. We're located in or adjacent to Southampton, New York, which is one of the wealthiest areas in the entire United States. Due to land theft and removal, our population now resides on a peninsula. So we are surrounded on all sides by water. And when you go out to the edge of our tribal territory and you look out across the water, you see $200 million mansions. And it's jarring to see our neighbors who have really benefited from the extractive resource economy. But then you look across at Shinnecock Nation, it's largely undeveloped. We don't build our homes near the water because of the threat of the storms and the rising sea levels, and all of the changes that climate change has brought to us. We experience a lot of things like saltwater intrusion and erosion. And so it's a stark difference between us and our neighbors. And so a lot of the times people are surprised that there's even an Indigenous nation left in Southampton, and they wonder why and how. How are you still here? And that's one of the things that we always say, we are still here. We are still here. And so I believe that we're still here because of how we function as a community. We take care of each other. We own our land communally. We share our resources communally. We share our grief communally. We share our successes communally. Everything is shared and everyone is considered when we make decisions. We make decisions collectively through a process of consensus. And I believe that all of those things have really allowed us to survive. And so when I was growing up, there was always this sense of, that it wasn't really okay, but it was okay that we didn't have resources because we would always have the ability to live off the land. The waters around us are very abundant in shellfish and fish and other sources of protein, as well as seaweed, which we use to fertilize our crops and sustain our agriculture. But recently, things have really changed, especially post-pandemic. We saw a real mass exodus of folks from New York City coming out to the east end of Long Island, where we are, and it really sped up the ecological disaster that we were experiencing since really the 1970s, when there was a vast overdevelopment of our prior homelands that we were removed from, which is an area called the Shinnecock Hills. That was stolen from my nation in 1859, and that's when we were removed to the peninsula that I'm speaking about. And all these homes went up. The county that we're a part of, Suffolk County, is the largest unsewered county in the entire United States. And that's led to just a massive amount of human waste and also agricultural runoff going into our waterways, which has caused a mortality rate of 99.999% in some cases of shellfish that we formerly, used to survive. So, there's always this there's always this idea that it was okay because we could work together, we could live off the land, and we would have everything that, we could ever want. And it's not true anymore because of the devastation from the excess nitrogen in the water and the rising sea levels that are really threatening our way of life. And so it's very alarming to us, and it's jarring, and we still don't really have the resources that other people have to address it, but we do have each other, and we have this strength in working in a collective. And so we very much believe in taking action. We're not going to sit back and just let things happen. And a large part of that is due to our belief in supporting the 7 generations. And so when we talk about the next 7 generations, we're talking about our children and their children and so on and so forth. But we're also talking about the prior generations and the lessons that they have taught us in how to work together and how to really vision for a future where we can enjoy the things that we have always enjoyed. And so that visioning for the future 7 generations, I believe, is what strengthens our ability as a collective to take action against the devastation that we've been experiencing. And we work intergenerationally. It's really important to us. In our collective, the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, we're led by an elder, Rebecca Genia, and she often tells us about her great-great-grandfather who was alive in the 1800s at the time that our land was taken. And, she shares all of the old ways with us, and we're constantly learning from the prior generations, which I think it has a lot of value. I don't think it's typical or normative in the larger society that you take so much value in what folks in the 1800s were doing, but to us it's absolutely essential to our survival. And so it also forms the basis of our memory, because we're able to remember what it was like, and we're able to remember the abundance, and we're able to remember our ways of life, and we're able to then vision what can we do, what actions can we take to ensure that the future 7 generations will be able to enjoy all of that beauty, and also move past all of the traumas that we've experienced due not only to land theft, but issues of indentured servitude and slavery, and really complete extraction and like planned collapse of our economy. And so one of the main things that drives us is a shell. It's called wampum. It's this purple and white shell, and it was used historically as a way to transmit memories, ideas, to reflect kinship networks, to trade with. And it's something that is really important to us because this type of shell only occurs naturally in the region where we live, in the Long Island Sound. Yet you can find it throughout tribes all across the country. It was used as a first currency on Wall Street. It was extraordinarily critical to the early economy of the United States. And what we started seeing as a result of all of the excess carbon in the atmosphere being absorbed into the water, we started seeing a lot of ocean acidification. And the ocean acidification was really causing our wampum shells to become really brittle and also lose their purple color, which is extraordinarily, prized by us. And so seeing this devastation to the wampum was our canary in the coal mine. It's what sparked us into taking action, because we really wanted to protect that cultural legacy. And we don't know what memories we will lose if we lose our wampum and our ability to transmit our way of being, through the jewelry that is made of wampum, through the wampum belts that really signify agreements and even laws, are in this shell. So the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers are, again, intergenerational collective of women who are devoted to taking action against climate change and protecting the wampum, not only for us, but for everyone, because it's so critically important. And there's so many benefits. Historically, we used sugar kelp. It's a type of seaweed. We use seaweed for all kinds of things. We used it for clam bakes. We used it as fertilizer in our corn, beans, and squash, which are also called the Three Sisters, and were really our primary source of agriculture and the way that we were able to sustain very large populations of people before colonization and the spread of disease. We also used it as insulation in our homes. So now in the Hamptons, a lot of times folks will come and buy a piece of property that has a home from the 1700s on it, and they'll want to demolish it right away to build a giant mansion. And they're always so surprised when they're demolishing the homes and they find that the walls are lined with seaweed. But it's just really an abundant natural resource to us that is, it can be used for medicinal purposes, cosmetics, it's anti-aging, it's very high in nutrition. You can get more calcium from seaweed than you can from a glass of milk, which is hard to believe, but true. So nutrient wise, it's really important to us. But beyond that, it replenishes the ecosystem. By purposely farming and planting it, you're reintroducing oxygen into the environment, which really spurs biodiversity. And so that loss that I was talking about in marine life that we've experienced since 1970, we have seen in our kelp farms this return of species who have found prior the waters to be completely not able to sustain life because of all of the excess nitrogen from the lack of sewer or wastewater treatment or even proper septic systems. And so in that way, we're able to protect not only our 7 generations, but also all of the marine life and the water quality, which is really being threatened and jeopardized And, in addition, we try to work with the local municipalities and jurisdictions to just raise awareness about the importance of protecting the water quality. And we go to, town board meetings and advocate for the use of funding. There's a lot of federal funding right now to upgrade septic and wastewater, and we're able to really have a voice because so few people are taking action. There's like this anxiety and paralysis, and it's like, well, what can we do? There's nothing that we can do. Like, yes, we can be alarmed at it, but then folks see us, 6 women, going and taking action and doing something, and I think it's really inspiring to a lot of people. I think that in mainstream society there's not that natural sense to work together as collectives to take action. But for us, it really gives us strength, and that strength and wisdom that comes from the older generations and the younger generations working together to accomplish something so beautiful, to protect Mother Earth, I think is really not only inspiring, but empowering to a lot of people. And, it's kind of like an outstretched hand helping to lead people into being cognizant of the fact that A, climate change is happening, B, we can have an impact if we work together to successfully mitigate and adapt. We are facing a very real reality that we may have to leave our homelands. We may have to leave this place where we have lived since the last ice age. 13,000 years we've called this place home. But due to the present day conditions, we're being told by agencies like FEMA that our territory is going to be 100% underwater. But it used to be 75% underwater by 2050, but now they say we're going to be 100% underwater by 2050. So it's about 26 years. So we're very cognizant that we don't have a lot of time left, but we still want to do as much as we can now to adapt and to mitigate and to take action, and protect the ways that we know how to survive. Even if we do have to relocate, we'll still have our ideology, our commitment to one another. I can't even imagine, having only self-interest, just because in every decision that we make, we think of one another. We think of not only one another currently, but also in the future. How are we going to transmit to the 7th generation this commitment to sharing resources collectively, distributing resources equitably among one another, and ensuring not just our survival, but our mutual success and mutual abundance. And that's not just talking about, our tribe. It's about everybody, because we know that, we're very cognizant of the reality that colonization has changed the landscape, and we're all in this together. And I think that there's a lot of things that are very jarring to folks who aren't used to working collectively. And it's kind of foreign to a lot of people, which is really surprising to us as we we lessen our tendency to be really, within our own community. Part of our strategy to adaptation and mitigation is branching out and inviting the larger community to take action with us and to just learn about our values and learn about our systems of economics. We were raised in a society that values bartering. And so we always, have sort of an inventory of, this person is good at this person is good at that, and, so on and so forth. And we're able to, in that way, exist in a world where we don't, we quite frankly, we don't have resources, yet we can find a way to make whatever we need to work. And so I think that, there's ways that society can really benefit from looking at Indigenous systems. I think that we have seen a lot of the harms that have been caused by colonization, and I think there's this desire to now finally, when we're at really the zenith of the destruction, to consider other ways of being and other ways and possibilities of existing. I may be a bit biased, but where we live on Long Island is extraordinarily beautiful. It's something that's worth protecting. We're very invested in, not only our well-being, but the well-being of Mother Earth and the well-being of the water and the well-being of the air and the land. And all of our relatives in the sea who provide so much to us. And so that's just, I guess, an overview of the why we do what we do, why we're out. We farm our sugar kelp in the winter. So we're out even now in February in very cold conditions. But even the process of our seaweed farming is very restorative and regenerative. It's a very relaxing experience. We actually don't use boats. We try to be as carbon neutral as possible. So this is all farming that is done. We wear insulated waders, and we go out and farm the sea by hand, and it's really relaxing. It feels like you're just being hugged by the water. And so a lot of people think, oh well, you're just farming seaweed, but we're not. We're doing so much more. We're replenishing the ecosystem, replenishing the oxygen, inviting all of our relatives back, but we're also asserting our sovereignty and pushing back against colonialism and this concept of ownership, sole ownership, and showing that, it's not just one person who controls what happens. There's a whole group of folks that have the right to have input into what happens. And so another thing that we do that's really important to us is we pay all of our farmers above a living wage, because we have been, again, cut off completely from the economy. And we believe that there's great value in doing the restorative ecological work that we do. And it's something that is just, quite frankly, not valued by our neighbors. When we look across the bay at our neighbors, there's just like this value and extraction and taking and using as much resources as possible to benefit, a small select group of people. But we have a completely different value system where we value clean water and we value clean air. And so we always make sure that our farmers are well compensated, in reflecting that the work that they're doing is extraordinarily valuable, and they should be able to do that work and be able to feed their family. The access to food, I believe, is so closely tied to sovereignty and connection to a place. If you don't have food, then you can't stay in a place and you can't provide for the next 7 generations. So literally, when we're thinking of those 7 generations, we're thinking, what are they going to eat? Where are they going to live? Is it going to be healthy? Is it going to be toxic? What actions do we have to take now to correct what's going to happen in the future? is something that we think about constantly. And the younger generations go to the older generations and they rely on the wisdom that were taught to them by the generations before. And so that's how our knowledge is passed down to the future. It's not just passed down to us, but it's transmitted all the way into the future. And that's the way that we can ensure our survival for as long as possible in this place. But we know that even if we do ultimately have to move because of the conditions, that that our future generations will still always be connected with one another and be able to provide everything that they need because of working collectively together.
So Tela, I'm going to pull out a few things that I've heard and just check with you and see if I'm hearing, I think what you're telling me. And then I have questions for you too.
Okay.
So what I'm really hearing from you is sort of basing your society on interdependence first, like the value or the knowledge of interdependence seems really important, and mutuality. So you talked about, about thinking across time in a way that is collective. So it's not based in one individual lifetime, but thinking about, the interconnection of generations and thinking intergenerationally. So that is a value that I hear, that intergenerational interdependence and sort of concern for people who are not alive, people who came before, and then also those that are yet to be born. And I also heard a commitment to the planet as relative. So you named the animal relatives, the beings in the sea, and then also the water itself, the soil, what you called the three sisters, the three central plants, beans, corn, squash, that provided food. And what I heard is sort of an emphasis on colonization removing an opportunity to have an economy, so that colonization is not just sort of land theft alone, but the impact that it has on an economic level, that it destroys the ability for Indigenous people to have an economy. And that's something I really appreciated hearing articulated so well, because I think often as folks from the dominant culture coming into contact with Indigenous communities, they feel sometimes there's this emphasis on charity, which is, things didn't work out for you because, you don't know how to do things right. So we're going to share the excess of our wealth with you in this sort of power imbalanced relationship, instead of acknowledging the willful and intentional dismantling of an Indigenous economy. And, across the nation, we see that again and again and again. And so one of the things that I noticed as you're talking about, preserving and building and adapting the economy of the Shinnecock is being adaptive, being embedded in the resources that are there with whom you have a relationship. So building an economy together with those resources is relative. So I'm just kind of processing that. And I'm just thinking it's just a different understanding of the basis of economy, where you're sort of collaborating and cooperating with the environment itself and with each other as a collective. So those are some of the things I heard. Did I get that?
Absolutely. And we really try to also address the power imbalance by the way that we compensate people. The directors, the administrators we're actually paid less than the farmers because again, we value what they're doing and we value the commitment and the risk that they're taking and going out in frigid waters. I mean, sometimes it's frozen or there's blizzards, and so a lot of the times when we encounter the dominant society, they're like, they can't understand that, the people who are doing the actual farming are getting compensated more, because it's just, I think in dominant culture, there's CEOs who are getting like $80 million, while their people who are doing all the work are getting like $10. Well, it's probably, I think it's like $15 an hour. I don't know what minimum wage is, but we do try to strike at the heart of that hierarchy, because again, all of us are equal. We don't have that. One person is not better than the other person. We're all, in this together, and there's value in what every single person brings to the work that we do. So it's just, we try to offer it as a model, an alternative way. We don't have to follow this like dominance and power imbalance that we see a lot, that leads to a lot of the inequity in pay. And to us, it's because every single family deserves the right to be able to feed themselves and to have decent homes, and to really have a fighting chance at doing what they think is most important, which is protecting Mother Earth and the environment. It's something that we place so much value on. I think it's hard for some to even comprehend the value that we place on protecting natural resources, and protecting what we know from our prior generations, the beauty and the abundance that we know to value, because we've been here so long and we remember what it was like. And a lot of times you have folks who are new and they say, oh, well, everything's polluted anyway, who cares, like, let's just pollute it more. And I think that is really something that I think that we can address in providing alternative economic models.
Okay, so Tela, there was something that I heard, and I want to just confirm this. So, one of the things I heard you say, Tela, is that the community where you are is one of the wealthiest communities in the world. And that community, I think I heard you say, does not have a sewer system. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
That's
right. So that means that waste is going directly into the water.
Directly into the water. It's caused a mortality rate of 99.999%, because when you have waste going directly into the water, it creates like a very nitrogen rich environment, which displaces oxygen. And without oxygen, you have no life.
So all of the solid waste is going out there into the water too. Is that right?
Yes.
That's incredible to me.
Yeah. So in the 1970s, we started having problems of brown tides and red tides, which it's from all the fecal waste, and it just suffocates everything. It's devastating. It's devastating, not only to us, but to baymen and fishermen and fisher people. It smells bad. It takes away from the beauty that I'm talking about. It causes these fish die-offs. So you just have thousands and thousands and thousands of hundreds of thousands of fish that just die, and then they wash up on shore, and it stinks. It's horrible. It's absolutely devastating, but it's not for a lack of resources. That's what's so mind-boggling. We're probably one of the richest counties in the United States, and there's absolutely no reason. We're definitely the richest town. Southampton is definitely the richest town. So there's not a lack of resources. There's just a lack of desire to take action. So by us with no resources saying, hey, look, we can work together. We'll all work together, and we'll go out and we'll take action, and we'll plant our seaweed, which, it sequesters carbon and extracts nitrogen, and we can do it. And we could start to see in the areas that we're farming this replenishment of the marine life. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, there's no hope, there's no chance, there's no point in taking action. And so when people see us taking action, with the little bit amount of resources. I think it really does push those with resources to try to come up with some type of solution, or again, just as a desire or a want to take action. That's what we believe is the most critical thing. You have to do something. We have to all do something. And if all of us are doing something, and again, none of us are scientists. We don't, have degrees in, anything relating to marine biology or anything, and yet we're still able to overcome that and take action. It's really the key. So we think that if others are invited in and follow our example, there will be kind of this restoration of, I don't know, optimism into the fact that we can reverse, we can restore, and we can regenerate what has been and what we know, because we have the longer memory. We have the longer memory, so we know what is possible, what is real, what can be again. So we can take action to restore and regenerate that way.
That is just really a great source of hope. I appreciate your words, Tela. And I wonder if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit more about your farming operation and your long-term plans, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you would like to expand that farming operation. Why don't you tell us about how that works?
Definitely. So we right now, our process is that we wild dive for our sugar kelp. So that's done in either late August or early September. And we send divers down to a kelp forest that is naturally occurring off of Montauk Point around Fisher's Island. And there's a type of seaweed there that has adapted to the rising sea level temperatures. The Atlantic region where we are, for example, this year saw an increase of 6 degrees, that's very high to have 6 degrees increase in water temperature. But we have found this kelp forest that has adapted and really thrived. So we send divers. They collect source tissue, which is, it's basically the pregnant tissue, which we then bring back. We work with our partners at SOMAS, which is the School of Atmospheric Science at Stony Brook University, and we extract that source tissue, and then we do what's called a release. We bring it back to our hatchery. Our hatchery is located on the campus of the Sisters of St. Joseph. They have a retreat villa, so it's used, primarily for vacation by the sisters. They have a mother house in Brentwood, which is a little farther west of Long Island, and so we actually utilize one of the cabins that are on the retreat center. Every September, we turn it into, we change it from a living room into a hatchery. We have about 9 tanks. They're like aquarium tanks. We have chillers on them because we have to keep the water, again, it's a cold weather crop, so we have to keep the water at about 52 degrees. And inside the aquarium tanks are PVC pipes. They're either 2 inches or 4 inches. And around those pipes, we have spools. So it's just like twine that is twined around these. And then we release the source tissue into those. It takes about 2 weeks of a lot of praying and good wishes. We sing to the kelp in our Algonquin language. We read them poetry. We love to read them Joy Harjo. So it was really special to us. We actually were able to get a visit last year from Joy Harjo. So that was really incredible. And we also run something that we call the Kind Words program, where we invite our children to come say kind words to our kelp seedlings following this like very critical time post-release. And after about 2 weeks, you're able to see visually what once was microscopic. You start to see the growth on the twine. And so then we continue to nurture them. We literally consider them to be our babies. So we control their environments, a nursery, very much a nursery. And we extend always kindness and love to them because we know what an important job that they have. As they are nurtured, we know that they're going to be going out into the bay, which is not a very hospitable environment currently. And so we try to give them as much love and strength as possible while they're in the nursery with us. And it's something that because there are a couple of other people who are engaged in seaweed, but we have really been able to be kind of a shining star, and people wonder why. Because even, we have folks who have been using this methodology a little bit longer, and they have been having catastrophic failures. And so they're like, well, what's the difference? And I really am convinced that it's our Kind Words program. We also have the Sisters of St. Joseph Zoom in and also offer prayers and thoughts and strength to the kelp seedlings. But we really do notice that it makes a difference to offer the kelp seedlings this type of support. And a lot of people think it's silly. Actually, I was mocked. I went to a meeting of our Suffolk County legislature, and they diminished it completely there because we were applying for a municipal grant under the water quality program. And they were like, oh, what are you just chanting at them? What is the value in that? And I actually had to, say you could benefit a lot from learning what we're doing, because the discourse in the room was so it was so inappropriate. And I was like, so I invited them to come to one of our kind words session, because, being kind to one another, it goes a long way. And that, the way that you speak to one another and the way that you think about plants and the importance of the job that we all have to do. Yes, there's a lot of work in maintaining this hatchery, but it's because of the hard work that the plants themselves are going to be doing that we see any type of benefit. So it's again about inviting those who are maybe not used to that into the process. In some people have revelations that it just hits them. It's like it's a very different way of doing things. And so our partners, for a couple of years, not only our partners, but other folks who are doing this, just had catastrophic failure after catastrophic failure. While we had an abundance in our hatchery, we always had very good growth, success in the methodology that we used, to the point where we're able to use our hatchery not only to supply seedlings for our farm, but we supply seedlings up and down the East Coast. So the geographic region that the sugar kelp that we grow in is really the Cape Cod of Massachusetts, all the way down to Long Island. So last year we provided about 6 farms with seeds. And then this year we entered into something called Seed Source, where we're able to just provide seeds to anyone who, is interested in, again, taking action and introducing seaweed into there. It's a lot of times people who are already engaged in aquaculture, who have like shellfish farms, oysters, clams, etc., offering the kelp to co-culture with those shellfish farms. And so the seedlings spend about 6 more weeks in the hatchery, again, with their environment completely controlled in regards to the water temperature, the light, because if they get too much light, that could be detrimental, and to the point where we can see that they're ready to go out into the bay once they're big enough. So once they're big enough, we don't use boats or anything. We farm completely by hand. And so what we do is we have anchors. The bay bottoms are very sandy, so the anchors have this thing on the bottom, and we're able to just twist the anchors. And we do shallow water farming, so the anchors range from 2 feet to 6 feet. And then we use marine rope to set out our lines. We do either 100 or 200-foot lines, depending on what conditions we're experiencing. And then we take those PVC pipes and we unwind them out into the bay, onto the 200 or 100, whatever the case may be, lines are. And that's called outplanting. So we outplant around December, sometimes January if they're not ready to go out yet. And then we farm them from there. So it depends really on the environmental conditions. In Shinnecock Bay, we have a type of algae called slipgut that really likes to suffocate our lines. So if we have significant issues with slipgut, then we go out and we do a lot of, we call it line shaking. So we go out and we shake the lines and we just shake that slimy algae right off in order to give the kelp the ability to really engage in photosynthesis with the sun. And so they're out, the kelp is out in the bay from the time they're outplanted, from December and January up until it really depends. We've been having to bring them out sooner lately because of the temperatures of the water increasing, but we typically harvest in May or in June. And so at that point, we remove all of our lines from the bay. The kelp can grow. It's really unlimited on how long they can grow. We've had some kelp that, grows 4 or 6 feet, but then we've also had kelp that's growing 10 to 12 feet.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really, it's amazing. And when it's growing, it's just this beautiful kind of greenish gold color. And so we harvest all of that and we dry it. We dry it in the sun because, again, we don't want to increase our carbon footprint at all. So we use traditional ways of drying in the sun. And then we turn the dried seaweed into a soil amendment as an alternative to chemical fertilizers, because the other thing introducing the nitrogen into the bay, besides the lack of wastewater, is it's the fertilizer from all of these estates. And before the pandemic, these folks were really only here for 2 months out of the year, but they would truck in all this fertilizer, and think about it's coming across the George Washington Bridge from New Jersey, and all those trucks are having this awful impact in the amount of carbon, and just really like leaching all of this nasty stuff into the water. So we're able to create a localized product that when you introduce it to soil and to plants, it acts as a biostimulant. So it increases yield, it increases productivity, it increases the ability of the plants to really thrive. And so we create something, it's a tea. We usually liquefy it after drying it. And it's used as just a natural fertilizer. And we, teach the story to our neighbors, the settlers, again, of how we traditionally showed the colonists, they in our situation, the first colonists arrived in December of 1640, and they were really cold and they were really hungry, but we were able to show them how to use the seaweed to insulate their homes and also to grow crops, because it does, again, have this like incredible biostimulant ability. And we're just able to model, our traditional ways. And this is how we did it. And this is how we were able to maintain such a pristine environment without all of the chemicals and so on and so forth. And we do a lot of work like going to farmers market, and we're very careful not to use any type of plastics or anything in our packaging, and really are able to offer this again, natural product that a lot of consumers now are looking for.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just appreciate your willingness to share with us and in detail and fully. This is absolutely phenomenal work, and also so inspiring. And so I know so many people, just as you said, Tela, feel stymied by climate change. Like, what on earth could I do? And one thing to do is to support this women's collaborative that is actually standing up to some of the most powerful, one of the most powerful communities in the world, and also to the shifting climate itself, and choosing to proactively, resist. And so one of the things that I heard too, Tela, is that you are not doing this in a vacuum or under a bushel. You've partnered with, it sounds like Catholic nuns. You've partnered with the local university, and you're sharing this widely across the U.S. and the world. And so I want to thank you for your work, and also just thank you for taking an hour and spending this time with us. It's such a privilege to have you here with us. And at this point, I'd like to open up the discussion and ask if our listeners would like to engage in our dialogue. If you have a question, if you have a comment, feel free to raise your hand, and you can talk with Tela directly.
Hi, Tela. I'm Megan. I wonder if you could say more about the Kind Words project.
Sure, absolutely. So we started our Kind Words program as soon as we started our hatchery, and a lot of it was to create an outlet for our children who really, we see suffering from the after effects of colonization. The students from our territory go to school in the wider Southampton school district. And, just in general, Native youth across the entire country, really, you see really high rates of depression. There's a great risk of suicide. We've really been trying to do preventative work against substance abuse issues that really comes with this sense that you're taught in the outside schools that you're not good enough. You're not, you don't even think about going to college because you're the only job for you is to, scrub someone's wealthy's toilet in the town of Southampton, or to be a groundskeeper for one of the golf courses that, by the way, are built on our sacred cemeteries. And so there's just been this destructive element of colonization to our children's well-being. And so we were really looking for a way to combat that, and really encourage them to be in an environment that is completely opposite, that, it gives them, sometimes it's easier, to be kind to plants or to be kind to animals. It's a start. And so we give them that environment to say kind words and to encourage the kelp to grow. And through that, we've seen that the children are kinder to one another. They're kinder to their community, and it really, the kindness, again, I spoke about my experience with the county legislature. It's just a lot of the times it's overlooked, and it's so important to how we work together communally and collectively. It's the foundation of how we do that. And so that's kind of how it started, but it really grew from there. We started working with other schools to come and invite them to do kind words. In one case, we had one of the schools run by the Sisters of St. Joseph. We invited them to do a kind words program, and some of the young women from there were so touched. They were actually part of a robotics club, and they had listened to one of those challenges because we wrapped the PVC pipes with twine, and we were doing that by hand, and it's very, very intensive. And so we had said something about, because I think we had just finished an all-nighter, and I had my little baby in the hatchery, and it has to be really cold because we have to keep it temperature maintained. And so I was talking about that, and the robotics club actually were able to invent this device for us that spun the things, but that was all coming out of the kind words program. And then the sisters really took heart to it. A lot of the Sisters of St. Joseph, whose campus we are on, they're older, so they're typically in their 80s or 90s, so it's not easy for them to travel to the hatchery, but they were able to Zoom in. And I have to say that those Zooms with the sisters as part of the kind words program were so impactful to every single one of us as the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, because they spent so much time, and their thoughts, prayers, love that they shared with the kelp was so insightful, and so it was just so moving, because they had really thought about it, and the well wishes. And we actually visibly saw growth in our kelp following these sessions. So it's not only beneficial for us as humans, and learning ways to relate and connect that are more positive than I think the dominant culture. When you're in this space of me first, me first, me first, then there's a lot of unkindness that gets some people ahead at the expense of others. And so it's something so small, but seeing the benefit and seeing the growth in the kelp, it just flourishes it, and it expands it exponentially, and it sends kindness and our values into the world in ways that it's so much more. That kindness doesn't just stay in a silo. It doesn't stay in the Zoom room. It doesn't end when the Zoom ends or when the children leave. It continues to grow. And again, we really do believe that the kelp takes that love and kindness that is shared, and it allows them to do the work that they have to do, because it's not easy, the work that we're asking these sugar kelp to do to clean up the water. And so I think it's really been impactful to all of us. I think every single participant, and then also us as the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, it's been incredible, and it's something to us that is very, very sacred and very important.
It just reminds me a little bit, Tela, of my family raises cattle, and all the years of singing to the cows, which is also kind of a funny thing, to go out and sing to the cows. But I don't know how to explain it, but there's a relationship that's real and reciprocal. I don't know if it's gentleness or this sort of gentle peacefulness, of just being together.
Yes.
Elaine, I see your hand.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been fascinating and very inspiring. I'm wondering if you have connection with anybody on the West Coast who's doing something related. I believe there's a tribe, that maybe the Swinomish here in Washington, that's returning to an old practice of cultivating sea gardens or something like that. I just wonder if you have relationship with tribes out here on the West Coast.
Yes, actually, I participated at the request of the Washington Sea Grant in something called the Seaweed Symposium. And I was able to connect with a couple of tribes in Washington and kind of do a cultural exchange. And that's really important to us because my tribe got involved really into the aquaculture industry in the 1970s as a result of the knowledge exchange that we received by going out to Washington and learning about the processes and the hatcheries, the shellfish hatcheries and the fisheries. And we were able to do that cultural exchange. A number of young men and women from our tribe went to the West Coast in the 70s and were able to come back and then write a grant, which allowed us to have the first solar powered hatchery on the East Coast, Indigenous owned. So that type of cultural exchange and knowledge to us, it's very important and very valuable. And very actually it's fascinating because there are so many similarities. This is not just something that can be done here. It's something that can be modified and adapted to either coast. There's the Native Conservancy in Alaska who are doing a lot of good work. And then, there's not sugar kelp, but there's a lot of bull kelp on the West Coast that is really critical to restoring the ecosystems on the West Coast. So it's very, very important to us to have that cultural exchange and learn from one another because we're really cognizant of the fact that other tribes have faced similar issues, and we can really expedite our growth and knowledge and expertise by working together and sharing what we know and what we've learned and what we've experienced, and that's the good and the bad. And so those types of symposiums and knowledge exchanges are really absolutely critical towards our collective growth.
So one of the things I want to just point out there, Tela, is that's really dispelling the myth of Indigenous people being stuck at a point in time and trying to reproduce some ancient point in time, which is not the case. And you started out in your talk talking about the wampum and how wampum can be found all across the United States because there has always been an exchange of trade and information among Indigenous peoples across this continent and beyond. And so Indigenous peoples, as you're expressing, are adaptive, responsive, collaborative, alive now, innovative, industrious, not sort of stuck in a point in time. One thing I've heard before in a talk that I gave is a person responded and said, I'm not willing to go back to hunting and gathering. Maybe you are, but I'm not willing to go back to hunting and gathering, which is kind of an interesting idea because my people never hunted or gathered. We're sedentary, raised sheep and goats and raised corn, and so anyway, but the idea that Indigenous people want to return to an ancient point in time instead of being alive and vital and responsive today, holding our values and our commitment to generations past and future. So I appreciate your expression of all of that. Other comments and questions?
I do want to say in response to that, I am an attorney. I'm a trained attorney in the United States legal system. And I'm a practicing attorney. So I practice, in a courtroom. I feel confident doing that. But, still recognizing the inequities that are in the legal system. To me, I feel like the strongest wins and the strongest battles that I can do are literally in the water farming. and utilizing the reserved rights that were protected by the generations before me, that protect our ability to hunt and to fish and to gather and to really maintain our ways of life. So while I very much, engage in the modern world, I think the strongest way that I can assert sovereignty and have that level of legal protection that allows for self-determination of our collective future is by engaging in some of these practices, these ancient practices in a modern way. So there's so much strength in innovating and weaving together these traditions with modern solutions and science. And I think that's where we can really see the most impact, when we're able to really artfully weave those together. That's where we're going to have breakthroughs, and that's where we find the innovation, and that's where we find the solutions that will really benefit our mutual success and collectivism. If I'm able to, I would love to just share some of the images of our kelp farming. So this is a peek into our hatchery. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So these are the aquarium tanks and the PVC spools that I was telling you about, wrapped in twine. And you can see here the visible growth. This is probably the kelp seedlings at about 4 weeks of growth. And we have 9 of these, again, set up in a cabin at the Sisters of St. Joseph. Here you see some really, really good growth, which is really encouraging. We probably took this after one of our kind words session. Like it's really mind-boggling that you can actually see the growth of the kelp after these kind words sessions. And this is us at the point where we're outplanting out into the bay. We're unwinding those PVC pipes onto our marine rope. This is about a 200-foot section here into the Shinnecock Bay. One of the things that's really important to us is maintaining the cleanliness of the water, which is what a lot of other folks, they don't do that, but we're constantly putting fresh seawater into our tanks. So sanitation and improving the water quality for the kelp as they grow is something that we take very, very important. We do all of the plumbing and everything ourselves, which has been something really interesting to learn. This is an example of a line that had a fair amount of biofouling and suffocation by slipgut. So you see in some spots it's a little bit bare. And it's really, a learning process of like how to successfully shake the lines off. But believe it or not, this line in the season had really incredible growth. This is one of our farmers, Danielle Hobson Begun. And you can see what I was saying about just how absolutely beautiful it is. These stairs are coming down from the villa at St. Joseph. And you can see directly across the bay on the left, that's Shinnecock territory. So that's where all our homes are. And then on the right, you see a tiny barrier island. Is called Billionaires Row. And so all those homes there are like $270 million. Like how much is $275 million? I don't even know, but that's what these homes are valued at. So it's a stark contrast, but everybody experiences the beauty. That's why those homes are valued that much, because it's so beautiful. Here you see the kelp. It starts very, very, very small, but again, we're lovingly placing it out into the bay. And even as we're outplanting, we're continuing to strengthen and empower the kelp with good words and kindness. Here's a picture of us sharing our mission at the Southampton Art Center. We do have a pretty big following. People are very interested in what we're doing. We have a lot of people who want to volunteer, want to get involved, want to support us in any way that that looks like to them. Here's our kelp growing a little more. It's always really exciting as we see it grow.
Mm.
This is Sister Carrie. She is one of the Sisters of St. Joseph, and she's very involved. A number of the sisters are very willing to come out into the water again. It's February and March, January. It's very cold, but the sisters are fully dedicated. We share a similar land ethic. That's one of the reasons why we connected with the Sisters of St. Joseph. In one of our first meetings, they handed me one of their palm cards. They're like, read this, and it was their land ethic, and the values that we have were so closely reflected in the land ethic, but they go a step further. It's not just that they have a land ethic, they actually are willing to take action and help us and support us and get us whatever resources that we need. And one of the most critical resources that we need is access. So the access that the sisters give us and the support is really a game changer and makes a lot of what we do possible. And again, you can see how we, farm by hand, and just think about the hug that I was telling you about earlier. It feels good to be out in the water and being not only us embracing the water and Mother Earth, but in turn, Mother Earth embracing us. It feels really good to do this. Good feeling thing. So it doesn't feel like work. It is hard. It is hard work, don't get me wrong, but it feels good doing it. This is a drone shot. Again, you can see the steps coming down from the villa, and then you can see it's very faint, but you can see the lines in the water. And so that's what our kelp farm consists of. We have in this location about 30 lines that are out. And so we farm during low tide. So we're very much controlled by the tide of when we go in and when we go out. I just want to show you, give you a visual of what we're doing. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Tela. That's wonderful. Oh, it's great to see those images, and it makes me want to go do it. I hope you invite me.
Yes, definitely.
I want to go do it. Other questions, comments, musings from our team here? I want to honor the fact that sometimes when you're receiving heavy wisdom, it takes a minute to integrate it. Yeah, as a teacher for many years, I like to indulge in the silence, let people think things through. So Elaine, I see your hand again.
I'm wondering what sovereignty issue you might be working on there in your tribe.
So we have a lot of issues. So we're something called a recently federally recognized tribe. And that means that we didn't get our federal recognition from the United States government until 2010. And that was after a 32-year court battle where we had to sue the United States. And trust me, we did not have the resources to do that. And so we were federally acknowledged as a people in 2010, but we're still working on federal acknowledgement of our land and also of the water. So now we're experiencing a number of issues. Like, for example, there's a number of offshore wind farms that are going up. The Biden-Harris administration just leased off all of the water around Long Island to these global corporations and wind farms, and trust us, we want to divest from fossil fuels, if not more than everyone else. We're a frontline community. We see the devastation. But it's been really interesting because the federal government is engaging us in this consultation process and recognizing to some extent our sovereignty over the water. But we face a lot of issues with like the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the New York State DEC. So it's really interesting because kelp farming or any type of seaweed farming is technically illegal in the state of New York. Some of our neighbors, like the state of Connecticut and the state of Maine, have very flourishing seaweed industries. In New York, it's not the case. You can only farm seaweed if you have a research permit, or for us, if you assert your sovereignty and your right to do it. So what's really interesting for us throughout this process of obtaining federal recognition, we had to show that other jurisdictions recognized and upheld our sovereignty. So how in the world do you do that? For us, we used something called the seaweed cases. And the seaweed cases were court cases that were heard from the 1600s to the 1800s over our rights to seaweed as a natural resource. And those were acknowledged because when the colonists came, they liked to use seaweed as animal feeds for their farms, for their pigs and cows and all of that. So, there got to be these disputes about who actually had the sovereign right to the seaweed. And the courts always upheld the treaties that we had made that the seaweed belongs to the Shinnecock Nation. And so by showing that, we were actually able to meet the criteria of being federally recognized. So when I say that going out and continuing this tradition and farming seaweed is literally the strongest way that I, as an attorney, can assert our sovereignty. It's true. It's what we, have always done, but, we have a right to do it. We have a right to the natural resource. But further than that, we have an obligation to making sure that it is always a resource that is available to us, because the sea conditions are changing so much. I mean, a 6-degree change in the water temperature is catastrophic. And so by us going out and like replenishing, regenerating, that in itself is asserting our sovereignty and our right to be here. And again, it goes back to food, because if we can't feed our people, then we can't stay here. But if we're able to have our seaweed forests and replenish and restore the ecosystem and support the biodiversity and invite all of these creatures back that we rely on them, and we have to protect them, and we have that responsibility and obligation, then that's where our sovereignty is. Our sovereignty is in the sea.
And so I just want to, just based on what you're saying, Tela, just acknowledge how the green transition is devastating often to Indigenous peoples. And so this idea that, oh, we're finally doing the right thing, now I don't have to worry about it anymore, is really not true. Because if the basis of it remains self-interest, capitalism, profit, the basis is the same, just what you're extracting is different. So you're extracting wind, extracting solar. It's still an extractive process. It's not a sustainable process. And so that's one of the things I find to be confusing. Many people feel confused by that because they feel that Indigenous people should be really pleased with the green transition, when really it has the same economic basis, the same extractive economic values. And once again, it's asking Indigenous peoples to take one for the team. I mean, I've heard that more than once. In order to save the world, you're going to have to take one for the team. You're going to have to let us extract lithium and copper and all the things that, all the extractives that the green economy needs. So once again, I mean, from my point of view, there's nothing wrong with wind or generating wind power. The question is, what is the basis? What's the logic of that economic system?
Yep. To us, it's almost like colonization all over again. And these, wind farms, they're like Dutch companies, and Dutch are the original folks that colonized us. And we do want to support, a green economy, and we do want to support the transition, but we do want it to be done in consultation and with respect for our sovereignty. The first wind farm that went up on Long Island was placed directly over a burial site, and it unearthed sacred burials to us. And we feel like if it had just been done in consultation, and there had, there's, LIDAR and technology that could have been utilized, and then we hear, oh, well, it's expensive to do that. And it's like, well, it's expensive not to do it also. So it's been like a constant struggle. And now we're being approached by the wind farms because, they recognize that there is devastation to the biodiversity when you introduce these huge wind turbines into the ocean. And so now they're like, well, can you work with us to, put out these 10 square mile kelp farms? And so I talked about the process that we use now, but together with the Sisters of St. Joseph, we're actually changing our technology and building out a permanent space on their land in order to, again, weave together the traditional ecological knowledge that we have with modern sciences and ways to advance and get over the challenges that we're being faced. Because last year we had to go on 7 different dives before we found source tissue, and it's a real problem. But this year we're trying a new type of technology, again, with the assistance of the sisters, that would allow us to do things like the wind farms are asking to increase biodiversity and have enough. But then we also have to be careful because, I go to these seaweed conferences and it's all about how can we maximize, how can we have the hugest farms possible, and it's like, but it's so contrast to like the small group kind of network. Building networks of small groups of people doing things is how you expand. You don't just have, again, one corporation doing this and that's it. So it's a careful balance that we navigate very delicately, while also acknowledging the realities of what's happening. But so far, the wind farms have been just another form of colonization, and incredibly extractful and not willing to recognize really the sovereignty that we have to say, what about the impact on the whales and the shellfish and all of that? So it's been a struggle to make our voices heard, because we really, again, feel that we have to be the voice for the voiceless, and that's our obligation, and that's our duty, and that's our responsibility. And it's something that we take very seriously. We're not just interested in our own well-being. It's the well-being of every creature on earth.
Mm. Well, Tela, I want to thank you for your time and for being willing to share with us so deeply. In this lecture series, we're trying to get out of the 15-minute sermon and try something different, which is having a conversation that is longer and that is primarily based in listening. So I appreciate your willingness to embark on this dialogue with us. And gosh, I just look forward to remaining in relationship. Tela and I are working together in the coalition a little bit and building a campaign in New York State, because Tela, as a leader, is willing to take on New York and the doctrine of discovery as it's embedded in the jurisprudence there. We very much want to support that effort. And so, Tela, I'll work with you, whatever you want to do, anytime. It's just been a joy to get to know you. And I thank you for your time. And thanks to everyone here for your willingness to take the time to spend this time together. Thank you, Tela.
Thank you so much.